Hey guys, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Today we get to dive into the rest of chapter 9 and finish this chapter out. We're almost to the middle of our book. We're in the middle of chapter 9 and Alex and Connor in the Charming Kingdom. They have found Cinderella's castle and they're trying to get Cinderella's slipper for part of the wishing spell. So where we left off, they are reading a part in the journal about the glass slipper. So it had said she flipped through the pages until she came across this section about the glass slipper. So this chapter, we're going to find out if they're going to get that glass slipper or not. So let's read and see what's going to happen. So right now she's reading the journal about the glass slipper. Cinderella's glass slipper is a very difficult item to retrieve. Her slippers, without a doubt, are the most cherished possession of the kingdom. First, you must find a way into the palace. This is rather difficult, as there is only one entrance. One of Cinderella's first acts as queen was to get rid of all the servant entrances so that when people come to the palace, they all enter as equals. Once inside, find a way into Cinderella's royal display room. This will also be difficult since no one is allowed in the queen's chambers without an invitation from her. The slippers are on display in a glass box on the top of a pillar in the center of the room. The slippers are not hard to remove from inside the glass box, but the room is under constant watch by 2 guards at its entrance. Find a way to be alone in the royal display room and remove a slipper quietly and quickly. Leave as fast as you can, because as soon as they notice something is missing, the guards will close the palace doors and you will be trapped and taken to the dungeon to be hung upside down from your toenails. Best of luck. How are we going to get into this palace? Connor asked. Alex began to think of a plan. She was distracted by a long line of carriages driving down the main street of the town toward the palace. They were elegant and colorful, and each was of its own design. Each carriage had at least 2 horses pulling it, a coachman, a footman riding on the back, and a number of passengers inside. The ball, Alex said. We'll have to sneak into the ball. Uh-huh, said Connor, contemplating this information. And what are we supposed to wear? Look at us. We're not dressed formally enough, and I bet we smell really fresh after walking for 3 days straight with no showers. I have an idea, Alex said. She opened their bags and took out their blankets. She grabbed hold of Connor and began wrapping the blanket around him, folding it strategically in certain places so it would stay up. Alex wrapped herself in the other blanket. There, Alex said. Now we look like we're wearing sensible robes. We look ridiculous, Connor said. Do you have any other ideas? Alex asked him. Do you think there's a fairy godmother hotline we could call? Connor asked. The twins walked down the main street. They followed the traffic of carriages toward the palace. The closer they came to the palace, the larger it grew and the more real it became. Many of the coachmen glared at the twins with bewildered and judgmental looks. A few passengers leaned out of their carriage windows to see what the twins were doing. Take a picture, it lasts longer, Connor shouted at them. Connor! They don't know what that means, Alex said. They reached the palace just as the sun was setting. As each carriage neared the front steps of the palace's entrance, its footmen would run around the carriage and gently help the passengers out. Alex and Connor had never seen such beautiful clothing. All the women wore long ball gowns of various colors, fabrics, and stitching. They wore gloves and diamonds. Some wore bows and feathers in their hair. The men all dressed beautifully too, some in formal armor and some in suits with broad fringed shoulders and square cuffs. All the effort and flair that the guests had put into their appearance made the twins feel very insecure about their impromptu robes. They stuck out like sore thumbs. They were the youngest people there. They were the only ones not dressed in lace or satin, and they were the only ones carrying bags. They looked exactly like what they were, a couple of kids sneaking into a ball. An extensive row of steps led up to the palace's entrance. Alex and Connor began climbing them with the rest of the attendees. It was such a climb, they wondered if they would ever reach the top of it. This world has goblins and fairies, but where is an escalator when you need one? Connor said. "Connor," Alex gasped, "look at this." She pointed to a silver star placed in the steps underneath their feet. It said, "This marks the very place where Cinderella left her glass slipper behind on the night she met Prince Charming." "Can you believe that's the very spot Cinderella left her glass slipper?" Alex said, with both hands pressed against her heart. "Absolutely," Connor said. "I wouldn't have climbed these steps again if I had left my shoe either." The twins caused quite a scene at the entrance. Everyone was absolutely appalled by their clothing. Alex could feel herself blushing from the way everyone was staring at her. She felt like she was back at school. One palace guard in particular couldn't stop staring at them, not in a judgmental way, but as if he had seen them somewhere before and couldn't remember where. He was standing just a step inside the palace entrance, and he greeted all the guests as they passed him. He wore more badges on his uniform than any of the guards, and he had a very thin, dark beard. Another palace guard was collecting invitations at the door. The twins began to panic. "What are we going to do?" Alex whispered to her brother. "Let me handle this," Connor said. "I saw this in a movie once. Just go with it." "Invitations, please," the guard said. "Our parents have our invitations, but they're already inside," Connor said. "And who are your parents?" asked the guard snootily. "Who are your parents?" yelled Connor, causing a bigger scene than they had already. "You mean you don't know who we are?" All the guards and guests looked among one another. "Connor, calm down," Alex said. What was he thinking? "This man doesn't know who our parents are, Alex," Connor continued. "I'll have you know that our parents invented wishing spells. How dare you show us any disrespect?" Alex wanted to slap him. She looked apologetically at the people around them. They all scowled in the twins' direction, except for the guard with a thin beard. He was actually smirking at them with gentleness in his eyes. "I'm afraid you two have to leave now," said the guard, collecting the invitations. "Leave? You're making the heirs to the wishing spell fortune leave?" Connor exclaimed loudly, enough for everyone to hear. "Connor, just shut up," Alex whispered directly into his ear. "Is there a problem?" the guard with the thin beard asked as he approached the twins. "Not at all," Alex said and began backing up, forcing Connor to move with her. "They don't have an invitation," the other guard said. "We were just leaving," Alex said, sorry for the confusion. "Nonsense," the guard with the thin beard said. "I just saw your parents inside the palace. Why don't I take you to them?" Alex and Connor froze. "You did?" Connor said, and then quickly remembered that he had kept up with his own lie. That he had to keep up with his own lie. "I mean, of course you did." He threw a dirty look to the other guard. "Come with me and I'll take you straight to your parents," the guard with the thin beard said. Before they knew it, Alex and Connor were being escorted into the palace. They were completely in over their heads. Did this guard know they were lying and was now escorting them directly to the dungeon? Or perhaps Connor's lie was truer than they had thought, and they were about to meet a couple that were definitely not their parents. "Allow me to introduce myself," the guard said. "I'm Sir Lambton, the head of the Queen's Royal Guard. Welcome to the palace." "Thank you," Connor said. "I'm Connor Wishington, and this is my sister Alex." "Where are you from, Mr. and Miss Wishington?" Lambton asked. "Upstate, Northern Kingdom," Connor said. Even he looked surprised by the words coming out of his mouth. "But our parents have a summer home in the south of the Sleeping Kingdom and a condo in the Fairy Kingdom." Alex's eyes opened so wide she had to remind herself to blink. "Ah, I see," Lambton said with a curious look. "Would you like me to take your bags for you?" "No, that's quite all right," Alex said. "We'll manage." Lambton led the twins down a long hallway behind all the other guests. There were many large portraits of past rulers on the walls, and a red carpet ran under their feet. Alex and Connor were all eyes. They had never been inside a royal palace before. There were so many shiny things to look at. Lambton seemed to be enjoying their excitement. He leaned between them and softly said, "You're sneaking into a palace, aren't you?" Alex desperately looked to Connor, but he was out of lies for the night. "Please don't throw us in the dungeon," Alex pleaded. "We didn't mean any harm." Connor looked at his sister with a raised eyebrow. Did she mean no harm besides breaking into the palace and stealing a cherished item? Lambton chuckled. I've seen a lot of youngsters try to sneak into a royal ball before, but never have I been as entertained by such an attempt, he said. So you aren't going to throw us in a cell and hang us upside down by our toenails? Connor asked. We stopped doing that ages ago, Lambton said. On the contrary, it would be my honor to show you two around. Really? Connor said. That would be lovely, Alex said, clasping her hands together. Thank you. At the end of the hall, Lambton led the twins through a pair of golden doors into the ballroom. At first, the sight was overwhelming. There were so many things to look at. It was impossible to focus on any one thing long enough to comprehend what it was. There was so much movement and color. The biggest chandelier they had ever seen, with thousands of candles, hung from the ceiling above an enormous dance floor. Hundreds of formally dressed men and women filled the space. Some mingled on the sides, while others danced to the music played by a small orchestra in the corner. Everything from the archways to the accents on the walls was golden. A grand staircase descended in the back of the room just behind two empty thrones. Connor knew it would only be a few seconds before Alex started crying. It's so beautiful, Alex said with teary eyes. Is this where they had the ball where Cinderella and the prince met? Indeed, Lambton said. I'll never forget it. I was just a simple guard back then. The prince was meeting all the young women in the kingdom in hopes of finding a bride. Cinderella was the last to arrive that night. She entered the room just as we are now, and everyone stopped to look at her. How did she look? Alex asked. Magical, Lambton said with a smile, lost in his own memory. She wore a long violet dress that sparkled as she walked. I remember hearing the soft taps of her glass slippers as she walked past. As soon as the prince saw her, it was love at first sight. The whole palace could feel it. Suddenly, a man blew a trumpet at the foot of the grand staircase. Ladies and gentlemen, the man with the trumpet announced, it is with great honor that I welcome you to the royal ball this evening. Now please give a warm welcome to their royal majesties King Charming and Queen Cinderella. The guests cheered and burst into applause. The royal couple entered the ballroom, slowly making their way down the grand staircase. Alex grabbed onto Connor's arm. Connor! Alex gasped. It's Cinderella! It's Cinderella! Although the twins had only seen illustrations of her, Cinderella was more beautiful than they had ever expected. Her hair was auburn and styled up behind a crystal tiara. She wore white gloves and a long turquoise gown flowed down under her, accenting her pregnant belly. Despite all the golden, glorious chandelier, her eyes and smile were the brightest things in the room. King Charming was the definition of dashing. He was every bit as handsome as any description ever written about him. He had a mesmerizing smile and thick wavy hair under a large golden crown. He could easily have been a movie star back in the twins' world. The king and queen took their seats on the thrones, and the guard with the trumpet blew the opening notes of another announcement. Let the ball begin, the guard with the trumpet proclaimed, and was greeted with another round of excited applause. The majority of the guests rushed to the dance floor. The orchestra began playing a fast-paced symphony. All of the guests paired up and began waltzing around the room, each looking lovingly into their partner's eyes with the entire time. The king and queen remained seated. You could tell Cinderella wanted to join the dance, but her pregnancy was preventing her from doing so. King Charming only had eyes for his wife. He was enjoying watching the dance more than the actual dance. He was enjoying her watching the dance more than the actual dance itself. At one point, each of the dancing men collected a shoe from their partners and circled them with it before placing it back on their feet. A Cinderellian tribute, no doubt. Time flew by as the twins watched the ball. The unborn child Cinderella was carrying must have been kicking from all the excitement. Cinderella appeared to have some discomfort and had been rubbing her belly and shifting in her seat for some time. She eventually whispered something into King Charming's ear. King Charming took his wife's hand and carefully helped her back up the grand staircase. The guard blew his trumpet again. "The queen is tired and wishes to rest, but she and the king welcome you to continue the celebration without their presence." The crowd happily obliged and continued their fun. "Would you like a tour of the palace?" Lambton asked the twins. "More than anything," Alex said. Lambton escorted the twins out of the ballroom, down a hall similar to the one they had first entered the palace through. It, too, was home to several portraits of past rulers and a long red carpet. I'm wondering if they're going to get to meet Cinderella. This palace was built over 500 years ago, Lambton told them as he walked. It's been home to the Charming dynasty since then. This is a portrait of King Chester Charming, Cinderella's late father-in-law. He referred to a large painting of an old bearded man with a crown. He looked exactly like his son, but much older. "How many King Charmings have there been?" Connor asked. "We've lost count," Lambton said. "There are 3 currently. King Chester had 4 sons: Chance Charming, Chase Charming, Chandler Charming, and Charlie Charming. Each of the Charming brothers had his own portrait on the wall. Chance Charming is the oldest and is married to Queen Cinderella." Lambton said and gestured to the portrait of the man they had just seen in the ballroom. "King Chase Charming is the second oldest and is married to Queen Sleeping Beauty," Lambton continued. Chase looked exactly like his brother, except he was a bit taller and wore a goatee. "King Chandler Charming is the third oldest and is married to Queen Snow White," Lambton said. Chandler looked like his brothers, but had the longest hair of them all. The last portrait in the hallway caught the twins' eye the most. It was hung slightly away from the rest and depicted the youngest of the Charming brothers. He was young and had a big smile. A single candle was lit beside the portrait. It appeared to be a memorial of sorts. "Who is that?" Connor asked Lambton. Lambton's happy expression faded away. "That's Prince Charlie, the 4th son of King Chester. He's the long-lost Charming prince," Lambton said. "He vanished one night many years ago, and no one ever saw him again." "That's horrible," Alex said. "His brothers led massive search parties throughout all the kingdoms, but they never found a trace of him," Lambton said sadly. "Fortunately, some good came out of the search. While on the road, Prince Chandler came across Snow White in her glass coffin, and Prince Charles discovered Sleeping Beauty asleep in her castle. And they both broke the spells put on them and were married." "That's incredible," Alex said. "So if Prince Charlie never went missing, Sleeping Beauty and Snow White would still be unconscious." "That may be," Lambton said. "And since his brothers took all the eligible princesses, Prince Chance had to put on the ball where he met Cinderella. Everything happens for a reason, I suppose." Alex and Connor couldn't stop staring at the portrait of Prince Charlie. There was a sad energy in the part of the hallway, and the twins were especially sensitive to it. The long-lost prince couldn't have been much older than them when he'd gone missing. Lambton clearly appreciated the twins' interest. "Now follow me. I have something very special I want to show you," Lambton said. Lambton led the twins down another hallway that led deeper into the palace. This part of the palace was completely vacant, and it made the twins more and more nervous as they walked. They had no idea where Lambton was taking them, and they were too timid to ask. They rounded a corner, and at the end of another long hall was a pair of black double doors. There were 2 guards on either side of the doors and a large stone arch above them with a sign that read, "Queen Cinderella's Royal Room of Display." Alex and Connor looked at each other with light in their eyes. They had made it. "Hello, Sir Lambton," one of the guards said. "Good evening," Lambton said. He pushed open the doors and the twins followed him inside. They set their bags down and looked around the room. The display room was a wide chamber with white pillars and a sky blue tiled floor. The ceiling was domed and covered in golden stars. The room was illuminated by moonlight coming from a large window in the back and then reflected through a series of hanging mirrors. Several special objects were on display and placed on the top of short pillars and surrounded by thick glass cases. Brooms, buckets, and old raggedy dresses were all put on show. A family of mice lived in a glass case in a miniature replica of the palace. On the very center of the room were Cinderella's glass slippers. They were beautiful and petite, made from pure crystal glass and decorated with diamonds. The twins could feel their hearts sink into the pits of their stomachs as soon as they saw them. They were so close. "Those are beautiful," Alex said. The slippers had put her in a trance. "I'm quite partial to them myself," said a soft voice that didn't belong to Connor, Alex, or Lambton. Sitting on the windowsill in the back of the room was Cinderella herself. They had been so astonished by the display room, they hadn't noticed her. "Your Majesty," Lambton said, "please forgive me. I didn't see you there. I was just giving some guests a tour of the palace." "Quite all right, Sir Lambton," Cinderella said, and walked across the chamber to greet them. "I like to come in here occasionally after long days to clear my head. Who might these two be?" Alex and Connor couldn't speak. They were completely starstruck. "This is Alex and Connor," Lambton told her. "Pleasure to meet you," Cinderella said, and held out her hand. "We're big fans," Connor said, and shook her hand a little too hard. Alex couldn't move. "You're like my hero," Alex said to her, and that's all she could manage to say. "Thank you, sweetheart," Cinderella said. "Welcome to my little room of memories." "It's remarkable," Alex squeaked. Would you like me to show you around?" Cinderella asked. Alex still couldn't move her limbs, but was able to nod. Cinderella began a small tour and took them around the room to each of the items on display. "These are the brooms and buckets I use to clean my stepmother's house every day," Cinderella said. "They were my first dancing partners. I remember whenever I was home alone, I used to dance with them around the house and pretend I was at a big royal dance. Although I must say they weren't the best conversations." Cinderella and Lambton laughed. Alex and Connor were still in shock, and they were in her presence. They were standing next to Cinderella, and she had a sense of humor. "Over here are my raggedy old clothes that my fairy godmother turned into a beautiful ball gown," Cinderella continued. "They're not much to look at now, but whenever my fairy godmother visits us, they turn back into the beautiful gown she created for me." "That's really cool," Connor said. "These are my mice," Cinderella said, and showed the twins the miniature palace full of mice. She opened a latch and took out a mouse from the case. She gently petted it and it peacefully nestled in her hand. "Are they the mice that were transformed into horses and coachmen for your carriage?" Alex asked, finally finding her voice. "The original mice passed away, but these are their children and their children's children," Cinderella said. "I look after them as a thank you. They have a horrible reputation, but mice are actually very gentle creatures. You just have to give them a chance." Cinderella put the mouse back with the others and walked to the center of the room. "And these, I believe, need no explanation," she said, and brought the twins to the glass slippers. She removed the glass case entirely and took one of the glass slippers in her hand. What do you think? Should the twins just grab it and run as fast as they can? You think they would make it? I don't know. I wonder what you would do. "Those couldn't have been comfortable," Connor said. "They were surprisingly easy to move about in," Cinderella said. "Did your feet ever get sweaty?" Connor went on. "That couldn't have looked really, Alex elbowed him in the ribs. Cinderella snickered. "Would you like to hold one?" Cinderella asked them. Alex nodded harder than she had ever nodded before. Cinderella gently lifted one from the pillar and handed it to her. A magical feeling went through Alex. She was holding a piece of fairy tale history. Perhaps the most famous object of all fantasy time was in her hands. She couldn't help but get a bit emotional. Connor, on the other hand, kept thinking of ways to steal the slipper. Alex looked up at her brother and knew what he was thinking by the intensity in his eyes. For a moment, they shared the same thought. Was it possible to take off with it? Connor was actually thinking it was possible to outrun Lambton and the two guards outside the door. "What was it like?" Alex asked Cinderella. "What was it like to go from being a servant to being queen? What was it like to be saved from a horrible situation? Your life is literally, a Cinderella story." A sadness came to Cinderella's face. "I never thought my life would change so drastically, so I always made the most of what I had," Cinderella said. I always laugh at the term Cinderella story, because if you ask me, it doesn't matter what life you're living. Life never has a solution. No matter how hard the struggles are that you leave behind, new struggles always take their place. People forget that I wasn't liked very much by the people of the charming kingdom when I first came to live in the palace. Cinderella said, "Not too many people were thrilled with the idea of a servant girl becoming their queen. Many people called me the pumpkin princess or the mouse monarch when they first discovered the details of how I come to the ball that night. I had to earn the kingdom's respect, and it wasn't easy." "Being a queen has to have some perks, though, right?" Connor asked. "No more scrubbing floors or dancing with cleaning supplies or talking to mice." "Meeting the man of my dreams and starting a family is the best thing that will ever happen to me," Cinderella said, with a smile, and she rubbed her belly. "And that is what makes me the happiest and luckiest woman in the world. However, living in a public life is a difficult thing to do, and even now I still find it a bit overwhelming. No matter what you do, you can never please everyone. And that was the hardest lesson to learn. In fact, I'm still learning it." This was all such a revelation to Alex. Suddenly, the fairy tale world seemed even more real than it had before. She never thought she could respect Cinderella more than she already did, but she had never thought about the story from her point of view. Alex set the glass slipper back beside the other one. At first, Connor shot her a look. "What are you doing? We have to steal that." But they both knew they couldn't take it. At least not tonight. Not after the kindness they had been shown. "After all the magical things that have happened in my life, this is my most prized possession," Cinderella said, her hand still on her pregnant stomach. "And she's going to be here any day now." "How do you know it's a girl?" Alex asked. "Mother's intuition," Cinderella said. "She never sits still when she hears music, so she must have my taste and her father's energy." One of the guards from the hallway burst into the display room. "Your Majesty, Sir Lambton, your presence has been requested in the ballroom," the guard said very seriously. Something was wrong. "What's the matter?" Sir Lambton asked. "Soldiers from the Northern Kingdom. They've come with a message from the king and queen," he said. Lambton handed the twins their bags, and before they knew it, the twins were following him, Cinderella and the other guards out of the display room and down the hallway toward the ballroom. "Now, how are we going to get a hold of one of the glass slippers?" Connor whispered to Alex. "We'll have to collect all the other items first and then come back for it," Alex said. "It should be easier to explain why we need it if we have all the other items. We've already established a trusting relationship with them." "I knew I should have grabbed one when I had the chance," Connor said. They re-entered the ballroom. All the guests were still, and the orchestra was dead silent. Cinderella reunited with her husband at the thrones. Dozens of the same soldiers dressed in silver armor whom Alex and Connor had seen on their first day in the land of stories were now spread throughout the ballroom. "Forgive our intrusion, Your Majesty. My name is Sir Grant. I am the head of Queen Snow White's royal guard. We have news regarding the evil queen," the leader of the soldiers said. "What is it?" King Charming said. Everyone in the room could tell it was not good news by his tone. You could have cut the tension and worry in the air with a knife. Last night, a magic mirror that belonged to the evil queen was stolen from her former chambers, Sir Grant said. The evil queen is still very much at large, and she has her former mirrors. And that she has her former mirrors makes her a much greater threat to all of us. We are asking, pleading, if anyone in the Charming Kingdom knows anything about where the evil queen is hiding, that they please let us know immediately." Snow White soldiers filed out of the ballroom. King Charming and Cinderella embraced each other, worried both for themselves and for what the news meant for their kingdom. "It was lovely to meet you, children, but I must go," Lambton said to them. He patted their shoulders and then headed out after the soldiers. Many of the guests began leaving as well. Alex and Connor followed them out, down the entrance steps and away from the palace. "This whole evil queen situation is starting to concern me," Alex said. "I know, but it's not really our problem," Connor said. "We'll be long gone before anything else happens." "I suppose," Alex said. "Where are we off to now?" Connor asked. The Little Red Riding Hood Kingdom is north of here, Alex said. I say that's the best direction to head. I hope we have better luck getting hold of Red Riding's basket. We'd better not chicken out this time, Connor said. Gosh, we're so close. We were so close. He clenched a tight fist. We just couldn't have taken it. Not without permission, Alex said. It wouldn't have felt right. I'm so tired of being a good person, Connor said. Despite having failed to collect a glass slipper and the abrupt end to their evening, the twins had had a pretty fantastic night. It wasn't every day they got to have such an intimate conversation with one of the most famous women in history. Luckily, the twins found a night driver transporting a cart full of pears to a village in the northern part of the charming kingdom. They convinced him to let them ride in the back of his carriage in exchange for a few gold coins. It would be only a few miles' walk to the Red Riding Hood Kingdom from there. Connor fell asleep as soon as they climbed aboard. Alex couldn't sleep, so she decided to read through the journal again. She reached into her bag and was astounded to discover what was inside. Connor! Alex gasped. Connor jumped back to consciousness. What is it? He asked. He looked over and saw something very shiny in his sister's hand. His eyes were still a little blurry from sleeping, and he had to let them adjust before realizing what it was. A glass slipper! Connor exclaimed, and Alex gestured for him to keep quiet so the driver wouldn't hear them. How in the world did you get one? Did you steal it? I thought it was you. Alex's mouth was so wide it could fit a dozen of the pears inside it. No, it wasn't me, I swear. Do you think Lambton or Cinderella put it in your bag? Connor asked. Do you think one of them knew we needed it? I have no idea, Alex said. She couldn't believe she was actually holding on to one of Cinderella's glass slippers. They both were completely dumbfounded. Looks like our trip to the Charming Kingdom wasn't such a waste after all, Connor said. And that is the end of chapter 9. So, such crazy things. They went to the palace. They saw the slippers. They didn't think they took them, but then they took one. Who put it in their bag? What in the world is happening? So crazy. At least now everybody knows about the evil queen and how she escaped. Anyway, that was a really good chapter. I'm so excited to read chapter 10 tomorrow. It's called The Red Riding Hood Kingdom. So I'm going to guess that they probably make it and that they hopefully get the basket so that they can make the wishing spell and they can get back home. Because I'm sure their mother is pretty worried about them at this point. I'm still curious if time in the real world is passing as quickly as time in the fairy tale world, or how that's working out. Like, have they been missing for 2 days in the real world, or has time kind of slowed down? I'm not really sure. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that chapter. I hope you look at some of the activities and questions I'm posting in the description of this video, and I hope that you'll tune in tomorrow for chapter 10. Have a great afternoon.